My area of research is how paramedics get killed and injured. I saw that there was a lot of risks when I was a paramedic in New York City. There were paramedics getting injured, and when I began my doctoral degree at the George Washington University, I started looking at what kind of research has been done on the risks for paramedics and found that there was very little in the way of research. So my first paper on the topic was on fatalities and how paramedics get killed. And that paper showed that the paramedic fatality rate was very similar to the fatality rate for police officers and firefighters. So it was a big shock to people that had not realized, no one realized at the time, how dangerous the profession was. And a follow-up research looked at non-fatal injuries among paramedics, and that paper found, the research there found that the paramedic injury rate was much higher than the injury rate for police officers and firefighters and much higher than the national average. So we started to see that we have a significant problem in risks for paramedics in the United States. The biggest risks for fatality are crashes, transportation in general. So transportation risks include ambulance crashes, it includes helicopter and medevac crashes, and it includes paramedics working on the side of the road, taking care of a patient, getting hit by a car. So those are the largest number of fatalities. Also in the United States, we have a dead paramedic a year from assault. So that's a significant problem in the US as well. For non-fatal injuries, as you'd imagine, the biggest risks are related to lifting, and so they're back injuries related to both carrying patients and carrying heavy equipment. So when I completed this research on paramedic risks in the United States, I submitted a proposal to the Fulbright Commission to continue this research in Australia. And I received a senior Fulbright scholarship and spent 5 months in Australia looking at the EMS system there and starting the research on how paramedics in Australia, what the risks are for paramedics in Australia. And I recently published a paper that was published in the Medical Journal of Australia, one of the leading medical journals in Australia. And that research found that there is no occupational group in Australia that has a higher injury rate than paramedics, and no occupational group in Australia that has a higher fatality rate than paramedics. The injury rate for paramedics in Australia is twice as high as the injury rate for police officers. There's a lot of things we need to look at to make it safer. The number one thing is research. We have no shortage of ambulance agencies around the world implementing all sorts of interventions to try to make it safer. The problem is that almost none of them have been implementing those interventions in a way that we can evaluate and in a way that we can show that the intervention actually made a difference. So we need to conduct research on paramedic safety interventions the same way we conduct research on interventions we use to treat our patients. And those need to be reliable research methods to be used, and the results need to be published so that ambulance agencies around the world aren't again and again and again implementing interventions that either have no effect on reducing risks or, worse yet, might actually be increasing the risks for paramedics. We know at the moment essentially that we have a patient with a fast pulse, but we don't know if the patient's having a heart attack, was just stabbed, or just ran a marathon. So that's where we are with injury research with the paramedic profession. We know the rates are very high, but in terms of the factors that influence those rates, we know very, very little about that. And so certainly we can imagine that there are things related to driving and maybe ways that we lift patients and equipment, even the very equipment that we carry. But there are so many possible causes that without a structured, reliable evaluation, we just don't know. There's no way to say what are the things that we need to do today to reduce those, to mitigate that problem. What we need to do is we need to have teams, EMS personnel, EMS administrators, researchers, engineers. People need to work together and look at factors that might be causal factors, and develop interventions and test those interventions in ways that we can show not only did this intervention make a difference in reducing risks, but we did it in a cost-effective manner. Research from other professions has shown that every dollar invested in risk reduction results in a $3 savings in long-term costs. That's where we need to get to. We need to have that investment in research to say, we know we have a problem now, we have to address it, this is the way to address it.